Now, as you heard me say, we're going to try to identify, isolate, and mirror the successful techniques, strategies, and disciplines of people who've gone before you. And there are many. And you know what? There's really not a whole lot of new stuff that happens in real estate. Yeah, times change and the kind of deals that people do at different times change. But there's similar concepts and strategies and disciplines that have been used years after years after years. Now, one thing about me, I've been fortunate in my life to be around very successful real estate entrepreneurs. As a lawyer, as a commercial real estate broker, as an investor, I'm always sort of rubbing elbows with men and women who've been extremely successful real estate entrepreneurs, some making millions of dollars every year, some with fortunes, made within their lifetime. And I'm, if nothing else, a good mimic. And so I've tried to figure out what's made these people successful, and let's talk about it. Now, I don't know if you all got a handout. Dougal, did they all get that handout I prepared? It says at the top, basic concepts. You know what, I have a couple extra. Here you go. Is that one? I might have, let me see, hang on. If there's not enough, can you share, or you know what, it's not critical that you have one. I'll talk you through it. Are we out, Dougal? That's it? Okay. I'll talk you through it. If you don't have one, it's not a big deal. The point of this handout is how we can, through an understanding and kind of a manipulation of some very basic real estate concepts, how we can add value, again, remember my refrain, without making wholesale, dramatic, physical changes to a piece of real estate. So let's start with very basic concepts. Your first page there. Our assumption is that there's a seller who's got a building we're interested in buying. It's 5,000 square feet. It's 80% leased. The average rents in the building are $22 per square foot, all gross. Now, in the real estate world, generally means, when you hear all gross, that means the tenant pays nothing else. No utilities, no taxes, no insurance. It's sort of the opposite. You've heard sometimes triple net or all net. All gross means that's what the tenant pays, period. There are 4 tenants, each with 1,000 square feet. One lease terminates every year for the next 4 years. There's 1,000 square feet vacant and available for rent. The seller's asking $850,000 for the building. Is it worth it? Can we buy it at a lower price? Well, the first thing we need to do is establish the net operating income, or NOI. Big deal, net operating income. You got to understand NOI. Most of you, I'm guessing, have heard it, are familiar with that term, yes? Okay. So how we figure out our NOI? Well, we take the fact we have 4,000 square feet leased times $22 is $88,000 of gross income. You'll see in point 4 there, I'm assuming expenses of $37,500. So we have an NOI of $50,500. Now, how do we value that stream of income? How do we value the building? A very often, very common methodology for valuing investment real estate is the use of something called a cap rate. It's short for capitalization rate. And it's really sort of just an arbitrary mechanism for valuing real estate. It assumes there's no debt. It assumes that a buyer's paying all cash and that he wants a certain return on his investment, and that return for the so-called reasonable investor, it's sort of a made-up person. It's the reasonable investor for a deal like this at this particular time in this particular location wants a cap rate of, and in our example, I'm using 8%. That means if he had no debt, he'd want an 8% return on his money to buy this building. And so the way you value the building is you divide the NOI of $50,500 by 8%, and you get a value of the building of $631,250. Now remember, our seller's asking $850. So we are far short from his asking price. Well, what do? Well, we could walk away. And you know what? Many, many times that's what you have to do. You just have to walk away. The problem is we're real estate entrepreneurs. And the problem of that is you got to own real estate to be a real estate entrepreneur. You can't keep walking away. And here's another headline for you. There's not a lot of low-hanging fruit out there. Sometimes you're going to have to reach for a deal. You know, if you think of low-hanging fruit, it's easy to get. You got to reach up higher. Here we've got an ask of, what I say, $850, and we've got a valuation of $631. We got to talk to ourselves. We got to look ourselves in the mirror and say, can we add value? Can we figure something out that's going to boost the value a lot higher than $631? Well, in my example, which by the way is a real deal, in my example, you'll recall we have 1,000 square feet that's vacant. And that 1,000 square feet at, what did I assume? I assumed that the market was now $24 a square foot. So that 1,000 square feet times $24 a square foot is another $24,000 of gross income. If there are no corresponding expenses, and there probably wouldn't be, that increases our NOI to $74,500. And if we divide that by the cap rate of 8%, we now have a value of $931,250. So the first thing we have to ask ourselves is, can we lease that vacant space? Why hasn't it leased? We got to ask ourselves those questions. Maybe the seller's not as sharp as he should be. Maybe he doesn't like using brokers. Maybe he's done no marketing. Maybe the building needs a coat of paint, whatever it is. But if we convince ourselves that without a whole lot of trouble, we can lease that vacant space, well then you know what? $850 isn't too crazy. We have some costs of leasing that space up. You'll see I reference those. Maybe that's another 50 grand. We offer $750. We settle on and buy the building for $800. So now we own this building. Here's a really, really important thing about that little analysis. The cap rate, this is extremely important for you to understand, is not a set or defined figure. You know, like you can go on the internet and look up what's a 30-year rate for a home mortgage, or you can look up the 10-year treasury bill, or you can look up the 1-year T-note. That you can't do with a cap rate. The cap rate is a matter of negotiation. And here's an extremely important point, how to add value without making any changes to any real estate. Use your negotiation with the party across the table by arguing for a cap rate that's higher or lower based on your position. You'll see what I mean in a minute. So that's a big deal, understanding how to negotiate the cap rate, okay?